Hello, good people, but now you know the deal. If the camera angle is off, it's not by design. I'm blind and it comes with the territory. There has been a lot of excitement about the withdrawal of the appointments made to Sector Education and Training Authority boards, SETAs. And this decision has been made by the Minister of Higher Education. Given that South Africa's political landscape is a wasteland, and it's such that people will nitpick and scramble for attention on the most smallest things, like who won. Various political parties have stepped up to say that it's me, it's us, we did it. Right? Because, we've got nothing else to discuss politically, to conscientize the people on. And yes, I understand it's part of narrative building and ensuring that you can scrounge out votes wherever you can. Be that as it may, that's not the story for journalists. And some journalists have been entertaining this farce. And you just have to wonder why. Why? So, with regards to this issue and this story, 3 things stood out for me. The first is the handling of uSihle Lonzi of the Economic Freedom Fighters. There have been several accounts about his conduct and what actually transpired at the committee hearing, because it is reported that he wanted to ask the Director General about the appointment of Buyambo Mantashe. This is Minister Gwede Mantashe, also known as the Tiger's son, right? Into one of the SETA's boards. And this then led to some type of scramble and fighting, and eventually he was ejected from a meeting. And my issue with that whole episode is that it's good to call out corruption. We should, by all times, speak about corruption. Why? Because corruption in South Africa is endemic. It goes without saying that it's a big problem. And the rot has set to an extent where we need to be over vigilant. It's just how it is. It's the price. And believe you me, considering the corruption that's happening in South Africa, it's a small one to pay. Now, of course, it is said that he was tolerated. This is what the chairperson of the committee, I believe it's Tabang Lezi, if I'm not mistaken, for a long time, right? Almost 20 minutes delay, and the matter had been dealt with. And for all intents and purposes, the chairperson sounds actually sincere when I listen to him about what transpired. So I can only pay so much attention to that particular aspect of the story. What concerns me is the acceptance, socially so, of violence that is often meted out against Black people. And this has been an occurrence for a long, long time. It's now embedded in our psyche. I understand that it predates the democratic dispensation. It happened in apartheid and colonialization. But till this day, it is more comfortable, it would appear, for parliament security, those bouncers over there, to manhandle Black bodies. It's just comfortable, and we shouldn't be comfortable with this. I refuse that. There needs to be a different approach, a different way of thinking about discipline and applying rules and so on and so forth. It's just a social point that I'm making here. I'm not saying allow for discord or ill discipline. No, I'm saying we need to think about it. And given the context, this EFF MP was raising an important point, a crucial one. Whether it was dealt with in the committee or not, etc., we should not have intolerance towards the message that he was making. Yeah, fine, he was grandstanding, perhaps, but he's a politician. They are politicians. The second thing is that the manner in which journalists, some, I must say some, are handling the story, it's awful. It's shameful. Journalists are essentially the guardians of news, of messages. Yes, I understand that the landscape has changed and how we consume media is different because we are now participants as well, right? We distribute and share messages and tell news from our own perspectives. Often the newsmakers even tell their own news. But in South Africa, we need to be sensitive to this nuance that media platforms, prominent ones, despite the rise of social media and its impact, are still largely owned by big corporations. And generally, they move in lockstep. And it does not help that, to an extent, there's some monopolization of the industry. And so journalists, in terms of their practice, they build narratives for these institutions. Now, in my humble opinion, right, granted, I've now done journalism in my postgraduate, so at least I don't have to feel too out of sorts when I speak about this. The story here is about the decision being reversed. The Minister of Higher Education has made a rather extraordinary decision. And why is this a story? It wouldn't be in any normal functioning society because, you know what, there's accountability. However, given the shenanigans of the last administration and other ways in which corruption was handled in previous administrations, it's quite interesting to see that government can now reverse a decision without it becoming a long, extended affair of, but there needs to be an inquiry, there needs to be a discussion, there needs to be a meeting of parties, hey, so on and so forth. So there you've got your hook already. But why is it happening? And why did it happen? It's surface level to be like, oh yeah, no, the EFF did it for the people, the MK wants to jump on the bandwagon, and the DA, the DA wrote a letter. It's like, wow, you're a journalist. You should know by now that these narratives will be told by the various political parties. It's important for them to tell those narratives. I might not like it, other people might not like it, but they'll do what they gotta do. It's part of their PR. I mean, some of these people are losing votes, right? So, what do you expect them to do? You know? I mean, in their timelines, they have to list ukuthi bona basebenza kangakanani. Yabo siyababona bo Sinawo Tambo, that whole gang nje, forever telling people, hey, you need to take heed of what we are doing for you, South Africa. They're arrogant, they're missing the tone of the message. But anyway, point is, a journalist, if you want to add insight, then you analyze the configuration of forces as things currently stand. And there's a lot that you can work with. There are the dynamics within the African National Congress. There is the configuration of parliament as it currently stands. The fact that the ANC does not have an overwhelming majority. And relationships between political persons. You can look at that as well. Like, there's just so much. There's so much that can enrich your story that you didn't have to. You didn't have to get into the cesspool of common, everyday, stupid politics. You just don't have to. But nowadays, you have journalists that want to compete with influencers. They forget what their roles are in society. So we have ourselves this problem. And then the last thing that I want to talk about, and I think it was initially raised by Lunati, one of my favorite writers and thinkers and researchers on X. And that is the point about how we have applied ourselves as a society when it comes to the issue of the tiger's pup, right? Or cub, I should say. And look, the point that Lunati was making here is that we can't make broad strokes about political figures and their families and their friends and simply dismiss them without really taking into account their own personal achievements and how they want to contribute to society. And yeah, it's true. It's very, very true. You know, I had to respond and say that, you know what, I truly appreciate the sentiment, the sincerity of it, right? But unfortunately, it's now an ideal. It's an ideal because corruption is about perceptions. And the issues that we've had to deal with when it comes to corruption are so serious that we now have to reconsider our position in terms of how do we deal with it. Personally, given our context and dynamics within South Africa relating to economics and job opportunities and just a lot more, right? I'm not comfortable at this point in time with political figures or their families or their friends occupying very important positions or being appointed to these positions. We can talk about maybe them seeking employment and, I think there's a nuance there that we can explore. But in terms of appointments and getting these opportunities, I just don't believe in the wisdom of those who are in power, in authority. I don't think that they have the acumen and the integrity as a whole to do this in a fair and just and equitable way that we can be like, you know what, this makes sense. I trust this decision. And unfortunately, they've done this by themselves. And the problem where the tiger's son is concerned is that Mantashe was at the forefront of setting this precedent, right? And it was at a time when he was making political maneuverings in dealing with a political opponent who was President Jacob Zuma, right? He basically led the charge or was amongst the people who were like, I know Tutuzane Melahambi, right? And the Tutuzane issue is actually different in the sense that Tutuzane was shackled. He was accused of state capture, right? Put there in court for all to see, and then the charges were dropped. And everybody was like, what's going on? Till this day, we don't even know what actually happened in that case. So now we can and perhaps should from time to time have these conversations about how do we handle such appointments, right? And do we have any tolerance? Why? Because these conversations help us to gauge where we are mentally as a society. I don't think that these appointments should happen anytime soon. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done in restoring faith and trust and confidence in institutions and establishing good systems of governance before we can actually have this conversation in a meaningful way. So it's maybe something that can happen in an era, and in that era, we probably won't be around. What are your thoughts? Do you agree or disagree?